Morning, Westside. Hey, it is a fact that we become like those around us. We become like the people around us, our friends, our peer group, and that's not a bad thing, that's not a good thing, that's just a human thing. It's been true for ages. And we tend to become like the people we spend our time with. Now, you might hear that as a hopeful encouragement if you spend a lot of time around people who do life well, or you might hear that as a warning if you spend a lot of time with boneheads. It just depends. I don't know how you hear that. So, how do you hear this question? What if you spend a lot of time with complainers? Complainers, people who seem to prefer complaining about their problems rather than actually working to solve their problems. Now, I bet you're one of two kinds of categories of people. You're going to hear that in one of two ways. Maybe you're a person who actually does recognize, you know what, I do spend a lot of time with people who complain a lot, complainers. But I am so annoyed by their complaining that I am fairly confident that I am not becoming like them. I'm not becoming a complainer. They're complainers, but I'm not. And if you're thinking like that, you need to be careful. You need to be aware because complaining is, as one author said, it's a lot like bad breath, you know? You can smell other people's a lot more easily than you can smell your own. You know what I mean? Complaining is like that. See, when other people complain, it just sounds like this droning whine. But when we complain, well, we're not complaining, we're venting, right? I just need to vent. And so we tend to be a little deaf to our own complaining. Now, you might be like me. You might hear it another way. You might be thinking, you know what? No problem. I don't spend time with complainers. There is a built-in repellent in every complainer I know that I stay away from them. They're too annoying. I always try to keep some distance between myself and people who are complaining all the time. Well, you know what? If you think you are at a safe distance from complainers, I've got some bad news for you. Because we are being shaped by a complaining culture. We're being steeped in a dramatically complaint-oriented world. Have you noticed this yet? Humans have, I'm sure for centuries, always tended to be complainers. That's just kind of how our sinful nature is. But these days, we have these super efficient, super public platforms for launching our complaints, often in total anonymity. The squeakiest wheels have often always tended to get more oil. But in an age where those squeaks are publicly amplified to the whole world, goodness, social media gives incredible leverage to complainers, making complaints a powerful and an effective strategy for getting what we want. Complain about your service at the last restaurant you went to? Here, have a gift certificate. Complain about the product you just bought, you weren't crazy about? Here, have your money back. Here's a coupon, right? Corporations are trained to throw you bones, to hush you up sooner rather than later, which, of course, in turn, trains you to complain more often and maybe even in exaggerated ways in order to get what you want. Complaining, if you do it well, if you do it shrewdly, it's noble in our world, courageous. And actually, so there's less and less social cost to complaining, more and more incentive to complaining. And there's more and more voices, both written and spoken, that make a living out of complaining about those on the other side. Which actually, in my opinion, makes these dangerous times that we're living in, especially if we are indeed becoming like those around us. As one author says it, habitual complaining, if unchecked, making a habit of complaining might turn you into an ouch looking for an injury. It's a great line. An ouch looking, that's a great warning. You don't want to become an ouch. You don't want your complaint muscles to grow so strong, your complaint reflex to be set at such a hairpin trigger that you get hurt even before you've been injured. To become an ouch looking for an injury to blame. Nobody wants that. The Bible has a consistently pretty negative view of complaining. Just a couple lines from the New Testament. Paul says, "Do everything without complaining and arguing." That's Paul. That's a foundational Christian leader in the early church who's probably writing this from a kind of Roman prison, which is it's a brilliant backdrop from which to tell people to do everything without complaining. And James, another foundational Christian leader, says to early Christians in the first century, he says, "Don't grumble." That's another word for complaining in the Bible. "Don't grumble about each other, brothers and sisters, or you will be judged." Look, the judge, capital J, the judge is standing at the door. James is giving a very firm warning of divine judgment when you grumble, when you complain. Now, whenever the guys who wrote the New Testament use complaining language, grumbling language, they always have in mind this collection of stories from about 1,500 years prior in the Old Testament. Stories about the Israelites, specifically stories from when Israel was in the desert wilderness for 40 years, in between being slaves in Egypt and being at home in this land that God provided for them. So Exodus, that's the second book in your Bible, actually begins this part of Israel's story. And then Numbers, that's the fourth book in your Bible, actually brings us right up to the end of this part of Israel's story. And so between Exodus and Numbers, you've got about 9 different times that the people grumbled and complained in a notable way. In Exodus, when they complain, they, grumble about not having enough water, not having enough food, which is pretty understandable concerns in a desert wilderness, right? And keep in mind that this is early in Israel's experience with this God. They're getting to know him, this God who is leading them through the wilderness. And Israel, you might think of Israel as being in her infancy. She's a baby. And so God hears her complaining and responds patiently, accommodating her needs, as any loving parent might do for a crying infant. And so in Exodus, you just don't see God getting upset with her grumbling, with her complaining. But in Numbers, the book of Numbers picks up the story after Israel had been in the wilderness for over a year, month after month, of God providing for his people in miraculous ways, sustaining them in the desert. Now, if your infant is crying because she's hungry, well, yeah, that's what infants do. But when your teenager is crying in the same way and for the same reasons that she did when she was a baby, that's a problem. That's a different kind of problem. You're going to handle that differently. So in the book of Numbers, it tells the story of 6 times when the Israelites grumble and complain against Moses and Aaron. That was Moses' right-hand man. And these are the 2 guys that God appointed as Israel's leaders. So the Israelites complain about their various hardships, right? Not having enough variety in their menu, the grumble about Moses and Aaron being in charge and the power and position they have over the community. And each time the Israelites grumble and complain throughout the book, God dishes out some kind of punishment on them to discipline them, some kind of plague or judgment to make it crystal clear that this is not how he wants his people to be. Now, when James and Paul and really the rest of the Bible warn against complaining, and really when I'm talking about complaining today in this message, you got to know, we are not talking about simply expressing sadness and anger. No. Expressing sadness and anger is part of an emotionally mature Christian life. Now, maybe that sounds strange to you. I realize maybe you grew up in a home that just didn't give you much space, didn't give you permission to express uncomfortable emotions like sadness or anger. And maybe those unspoken rules got tethered to your being a Christian or to your being mature and strong, and you internalized those rules. And although you wouldn't really say it this way out loud, deep down, your heart believes something like, real Christians don't get angry, so I shouldn't get angry. Or strong and mature people don't cry, so I shouldn't cry. Some nonsense like that. Well, a quick scan through the Bible shows that thinking, that belief to be just ridiculous. Right in the middle of your Bible are the Psalms, which is this large collection of prayers and songs to God, many of them expressing sadness and anger, actually modeling for you how to express these emotions directly to God. And then you got the book of Lamentations, Lamentations, right? A whole book of poetic lamenting, mourning, grieving before God. The book of Job is chapter after chapter of a suffering righteous man named Job, expressing self-pity and doubt and anger at God. And in all these expressions, Job doesn't sin. He doesn't lose his righteous standing. And good grief, the center of your faith, you've got Jesus. God himself in human flesh and blood. Jesus wept, Jesus got angry, and when his physical and emotional pain peaked at the cross, he borrows a line from the psalmist, crying out to the Father, my God, why have you abandoned me?" Jesus expressed powerfully negative emotions without losing any of his righteous standing with God the Father. The Bible doesn't just give room for sadness and anger. It is clear that feeling it and expressing it is part of a righteous, emotionally mature Christian life. So expressing sadness and anger can be healthy, quite distinct from complaining and grumbling. Also, when we talk about complaining, we are not talking about talking out your frustrations and your disappointments with people who upset you. That's not what we're talking about. That is absolutely different from what the Bible calls complaining. Talking out your frustrations and disappointments with those who upset you is part of a relationally mature Christian life. So when you're, frustrated with your housemate for leaving the lights on all the time, when you're frustrated with your roommate for leaving the place a wreck, when you're disappointed with your coworker or maybe your supervisor for making a decision that cost you extra time and energy, maybe money, when you're hurt, when your feelings are hurt because someone didn't consider you or your feelings, you've got to talk that stuff out with people. That's essential. That's not just part of emotional maturity. That's an essential part of healthy, satisfying relationships with people. Now, I realize maybe that sounds strange to you. Maybe you grew up in a family that had certain things you couldn't talk about. Some subjects you just didn't bring up because mentioning them would trigger someone's shame or embarrassment, maybe offend or anger somebody. You need to know. If you don't already know, you need to know that Westside, this church, is not that kind of family. Maybe you've been around here long enough to hear us say, you can ask anything, you can say anything around here as long as you're saying it to the right person, at the right time, in the right way. Have you heard us say that? You know that? Right person means, for example, if I say something dumb in this message today and I offend you and I hurt your feelings, first of all, know that that's accidental, all right? And know that can happen. I know that can happen because I'm a bonehead sometimes. Go to the right person means come to me, right? Don't vent to 3 other people before you come to me. No. If I'm the one who offended you, please, I'm the right person to talk that through, to talk to about it. Please do me that favor. Give me that chance to apologize directly to you and give me the chance to reframe whatever I was trying to say. And come to me at the right time. That means, first of all, again, not after you've vented to 3 other people, but secondly, come to me not when you're like red hot angry about it, all right? Because generally, you probably have learned this, I hope you've learned this, generally when we're hurt or angry, our immediate response generally is not our best response. So when we send the email, too reactively, send the text too impulsively, spout off at the mouth too rashly, we say things we regret, and we actually increase our problems. So you give yourself a little time to cool down, at least long enough to process it all with both sides of your brain, right? At least that long, and then you reach out. Hey, come on, come to me in the right way. The right way means that you come to me wanting to make things right between us, not keep things wrong between us, right? So it means you come to me in whatever way that gives me the best possible chance to make things right with you. Set me up for success in this conversation, not failure. So that means, of course, not on social, not with an angry mob outside my house with torches and pitchforks, all right? Not in an anonymous letter that I'm not able to respond to, not through a text, unless through that text you're trying to set up a time to get with me, either voice to voice or face to face, so that I have the best possible chance to make things right with you. I'm telling you, when you live by that axiom, when you really know that you can really ask or say anything, as long as you're saying it to the right person at the right time in the right way, when you walk that axiom into your relationships at home, in the workplace, in your marriage, in your friendships, you will find that it has a trust-building, unifying effect on your relationships. Completely different from complaining, which always has a corrosive effect on relationships, moving them into a less trusting, more divided direction. So how do you know? How do you know if you're expressing this stuff in healthy ways or if it's actually coming out in unhealthy, grumbling, complaining ways? What's the difference, right? When does the healthy behavior become the unhealthy, complaining thing? Well, this is one of those times where you got to check the ingredients. You got to turn the back of the product over, look at the label. You got to see what's in the product. And you'll notice that the unhealthy thing, complaining, has some unhealthy additives in it. You know, it's always the nasty additives that get you, isn't it? You already know this. You know, what's the difference between the kind of ketchup that's good for you and the kind that's bad for you and tastes delicious, right? You know this. I mean, both ketchups are used at the same meals. They both have tomatoes and water and vinegar, right? They all get the same basic ingredients, but the unhealthy one has at least one unhealthy additive. It's always the high fructose corn syrup, isn't it? It ruins everything. And it makes it so delicious, too, at the same time. What's the difference between bread and cookies, right? Well, they both have flour and water and an egg. But one of them has much sugar and fat in it, added to it, right? Which is what makes it so stinking delicious, and it's what makes it bad for you, right? Healthy expressions of pain have the same basic ingredients as unhealthy complaining. They both contain sadness and anger and disappointment and frustration. Those are not unhealthy ingredients. But complaining has unhealthy additives that make it a completely different product, that make it a more tempting product. Maybe you can identify more than I can, but I spot 3 additive ingredients present in unhealthy complaining that you just don't find in the healthy stuff. And these 3 additives aren't just in our complaining culture broadly, they are also really easy to see in the ways that the Israelites complained to Moses and to God, in the Israelite grumbling. Additive number 1 is comparison. This practice of comparing our lives with either our past or with other people. When you read through Numbers, you can't miss that their complaining is just loaded with comparison. So in Numbers 11, for example, they say this. They say, for some meat, the Israelites exclaimed. We remember the fish that we used to eat for free in Egypt, and we had all the cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, and garlic we wanted, but now, our appetites are gone. All we ever see is the stinking manna. It's like they're saying, who cares that this manna is miraculously provided for us every morning by the hand of God for our sustenance in the present. Forget what he's doing now. Compared to the variety that we used to have, compared to the past, the present is trash. This stuff is trash. And nearly every time the Israelites complain in Exodus and Numbers, they tend to compare their present to their past in Egypt in a way that makes their present experience more miserable. They deify their past in order to better demonize their present. They remember their past so fondly, strangely, bizarrely forgetting about the bitter slavery part, about the part where Pharaoh was slaughtering their infants, right? They forget all that so that they can better accentuate their pain and amplify their self-pity in the present. So instead of opting to enjoy the past as their past and endure the present as their present, they use the good of the past to make their present circumstances more miserable. Why would they do that? Why do you do that? Why do we use a glorified version of the past to add power and strength and leverage to our complaining in the present? And of course, the Israelites don't just do this temporally. They don't just play this misery-loving comparison game with their own past. They actually also play it with themselves, among themselves, relationally. So you find some of them jealously comparing themselves to Moses and Aaron, grumbling about their position and authority over the community. And so they say to Moses and Aaron in number 16, they're like, hey, listen, guys, we've all been set apart. The whole community of Israel has been set apart by the Lord. And he is with all of us. So what right do you guys have, Moses and Aaron, to act as though you are greater than the rest of the Lord's people, right? Like you can't miss the undertones of jealousy and envy here, can you? Right? They're saying, what gives you the right to put yourselves above us? We're all special to God, which would be fine and quite satisfying to us if it wasn't for Moses and Aaron being super special, right? See, we're fine with what we have until we start comparing it to what others have. Has playing the comparison game ever done you any favors, really? In your scrolling, does comparing your life to other people's, has that ever led to good things in your life? I know it strengthens your self-pity. I know it strengthens your complaints. Is that really what you want to make stronger in your life? I think it's fantastic advice that whenever you find yourself comparing yourself to others, just quit it. Cut it out of your life. Take it off your phone. There is a trace of comparison and envy in every complaint. And whenever you see it, get it out. Another additive ingredient that you find in complaining and grumbling, but not in the healthy stuff, is additive number 2, ego. Maybe more specifically, entitlement. You know what entitlement is. Entitlement is that little voice inside you that says, I deserve better than this. Right? You're not just saying, I wish I had more. I wish I had better. That's probably a healthier way to say it. What you're saying when you're entitled is, I deserve more and better. It's wrong that I don't have more or better. It's not just that we wish we had some cucumbers and onions to go with this manna. It's that, doggone it, we deserve better than this. God and Moses are slighting us. We're getting cheated out of what belongs to us by right? It's not just that we wish we had more authority, more power to make decisions on behalf of our community here in the wilderness. It's that, no, we deserve more. Moses is cheating us out of what's ours, cheating us out of power that belongs to us by right. It's not just that they made my latte at the wrong temperature. It's that I paid $5 for that thing. I'm a paying customer. I deserve better than this. How dare they not recognize that about me? And I'm working my tail off every day at work. Every day I'm working my tail off. And when I get home, doggone it, I deserve better than what I get. It's not just that I wish God would alleviate some struggles in my life. That'd be a healthy way to say it. It's that I'm a good person. I'm a stinking saint compared to the other schmucks that are around me. I deserve better than this. I deserve an easier life than the one that God has given me right now. wherever you find complaining, the kind that God finds offensive, you will find some entitlement. And when you see that, when you spot that in your life, in your heart, it's got to go. Get rid of it. The third additive ingredient present in complaining is misplaced blame. Blaming the wrong person, tipping the scales and misbalancing the blame in your relational equation. You'll find that in complaining. There's this clear, comically clear example of this happening in one of the Israelite grumblings. It was the day after God judged a group of 250-ish grumbling Israelites who actually incited a revolt against Moses and Aaron and their leadership of the Israelite community. And the way that God did it was unbelievably clear, that it was not something that humans would be capable of, right? He opened up the ground and swallowed this group of grumbling rebels, right? It was unmistakably divine judgment for responding to their grumbling rebellion. And the next day, the surviving Israelites have the gall to say to Moses and Aaron this. They're like, you are the ones who have caused the death of the Lord's people. What? This accusation is so disconnected from reality, it's comical. I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. Whom do you think caused this? The ground opened up and swallowed hundreds of people, for goodness sake. You think it was the result of Moses' behaviors? It was so clearly God judging those people. Those who died caused their own death by their rebellion, ultimately rebelling against the God who is leading them. And in their complaining, they were completely blind to this obvious truth. Complaining does that. Complaining can blind us from seeing ways in which we're responsible for our own misery. So real complaining always has a trace of misplaced, misbalanced blame in it. It's weighted in such a way that when we're the ones complaining, we can always say we have the right to be angry because it's their fault, it's his fault, it's her fault. Have you learned this about yourself yet? That when what we want to be true can blind us to some very obvious truths. When I want it to be your fault, I will be blind to the obvious ways in which it is at least partially my fault. You will probably never thrive in relationships, friendships, marriage, or work relationships, any relationships, without learning this lesson at some level. Even when you know it is 95% their fault. It's not until you own your 5% that the blinders come off and you can see clearly that if you had played your 5% differently, it would have changed the outcome 100%. Courageously owning your part, fully apologizing for your part, undoes the complaint. It changes it into a different product altogether, one that transforms this whole thing into an opportunity for deeper love, deeper intimacy, more trust, more unity in your relationships. So the next time someone offends you, someone overlooks you, slights you, doesn't give you what you know you deserve, and you feel a complaint just burning on your lips or maybe your fingertips, ask yourself, in what way am I responsible for my pain? You don't undo complaining in your life by suppressing the real feelings, by stuffing sadness and anger and frustration and disappointment. You don't undo complaining by saying, well, others have it so much worse than I have it. I shouldn't complain, so I'm not going to say anything. No. Slapping a smile on it, that doesn't, pretending not to be hurt, this stuff doesn't make you any more like Jesus. Don't think that it makes you more like Jesus. Instead, undo your complaining by letting Jesus undo those unhealthy additives that you've, for some reason, smuggled into your pain. And as those New Testament commands imply, if you're a Christian, if you've given your life to Jesus, you've already got everything you need to undo those additives. Come on, comparison? You already know He's given you, everything you need to live a joy-filled life right now. He has conquered death. He has blessed you with life you didn't deserve. Grass looks greener in your neighbor's yard? Okay, quit looking at it. Stop obsessing over it. It's not making anything any better. Other people have more or better than you? Okay. What is that to you? That's not yours to steward right now. You have plenty. You already have more than enough to be obedient with right now and to live a joy-filled life right now. Entitlement and ego? Come on. You started your life over, not on earning, but on grace. You started your life over on the premise that you aren't deserving of this life that you've been given. You gave Him that old life of yours that was all about the ego. This new life that you live is lived out of gratitude for a free gift you could never earn for yourself. You live now out of gratitude, not out of a fear that the universe won't pay up what it owes you. Misplaced blame. When you chose Jesus, you took responsibility for your sin. You owned it. You said, I am a sinner and I desperately need a Savior. And you know what? It didn't kill you. Matter of fact, that was the moment that your real life started. Owning your sin was the smartest risk you ever took. You gained far more than you ever lost. And ever since then, you have become not less, but more aware of your sin, more aware of your need for Jesus. And if you need Him less today than you did when you were baptized, you've been doing it all wrong. While it still takes courage, owning your sin, even when you're clashing with another sinner, owning your sin is the way you embrace the forgiveness that God continues to offer you, gaining you far, far more than you could ever lose. Friends, we live in a culture that doesn't know how to deal with its pain in healthy ways. Meanwhile, it is getting more and more adept, more and more efficient at complaining, nobilizing it. And it's getting lured into thinking that it can complain the pain away. And they're killing each other out there. They are desperately needing to see another way, church. They need to see another way. You got to listen to what Paul says, how he finishes this thought. He says in Philippians 2, he says, do everything without complaining and arguing, so that you may be blameless and innocent, so that you might be children of God without fault in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation in which you shine like stars in this world. He's saying, shine like stars, church. Stand out, please. Be distinct in this world. Live differently from the darkness around you. It's precisely because the stars are distinct in the night sky that for thousands of years people have used stars to navigate toward their destination, relying on the stars, looking to the stars to help them get to where they're wanting to go in the darkness when there are no other clues available. Our world, our complaining culture has lost its way. Church, they've got to see another way. So shine like stars in this world. Absolutely express your sadness and your anger. Learn to express that in healthy, God-honoring ways, whenever you feel it inside you. Absolutely talk out your frustrations and your disappointments with the people who have upset you. Learn to do that in healthy and God-honoring ways. Don't suppress that stuff. Work that stuff out. And as you do, train your lips and train your heart never to complain. Do everything without complaining and arguing, because the world, church, the world needs to see what that looks like. And God wants to send them to you so that they can see what that looks like.